Thanks for joining us today. Today we're going to run through our P6-QA tool. And this is a tool that helps you hunt down scheduling problems, deficiencies in P6. I'm Nicole Jardin. I'm the CEO of Emerald Associates, and I'll be running through the presentation. With me to answer questions is Sue Hopkins, and she's coming to you from Wyoming. Both of us are in cold weather, so nothing fun to brag about here, weather-wise. So let's jump in. Let's talk about some of the typical struggles and touch on why a tool like P6-QA can be so valuable for a team. So P6 is a wonderful tool for building out project schedules that include dates, resources, and costs. So it's helping you do the full meal deal, if you will, including earned value. But the struggle is usually to get reliable and consistent schedules. What I think is a quality schedule might be quite different to what the next person thinks is a quality schedule. So this is where we end up with the struggle of what is quality? Is this schedule acceptable? Is it doing what it needs to? And that's where P6-QA comes in. So it'll help you run through and try and figure out what that looks like, okay? So typically this comes into play when people receive schedules from contractors. So I'm gonna ask the question. If you would like to answer you can. So I'm gonna ask, do you receive schedules from contractors? Okay, so it does depend on the role. If you're a prime contractor, EPC, or a construction manager, engineering company, so it can certainly vary. And I'll show the results, a handful of you answered. So it does depend, okay? And that also will dictate kind of what you're gonna do with P6-QA. So what we're looking at when we're looking at the schedule is we're trying to understand, of course, can we meet the timelines with the resources we have in the budget that we have? That's what we're trying to do. That's the whole point of using P6, is to put those three facets together in a time-based CPM schedule so you can answer that question reliably. But that's not necessarily easy if you're not the only ones contributing to the schedule. So you've got other players that are providing schedules that have deadlines to meet, and you need to be able to reliably look at that and understand that. Now, not only that, you have your own business processes that you might need to be adhering to, right? So certain standards that you've put together, maybe it's in a specification that you've put out to contractors, to engineering firms, and you want to monitor that very, very easily, okay? Again, that will contribute to whether or not you've got a quality schedule. Now, you want to be able to do this and understand this on a simple day-to-day basis without having to go outside and hire third-party reviewers, companies like ourselves who come in and take a look at your schedule, because you've got to pay for us to get up to speed on the project, understand the criteria, and do the analysis. So, we put together our own metrics, and then we decided, why are we doing this? Let's get this in the hands of our clients and let them self-critique as much as they possibly can, and then bring us in if need be on the odd occasion so that we can fill a gap or just help build up some expertise. But why keep it so that they only hire us once a year instead of just critiquing schedules as things go? So that's really kind of how P6-QA came about. And really what the benefits are that your team can grow, self-critique, be in a much better position to steer the ship, if you will, into the right direction on getting good quality schedules all the time. From your own team, if you're not getting them from external sources, but as well as from external sources. trying to take away that subjectivity that could come into critiquing a schedule and make it much more consistent and objective. That's really, really what we're striving for when we put the tool together. Okay, let me see. Let me ask, how do you check the schedule quality right now? Because this is always quite an interesting one. So again, if you would like to answer, you certainly can. If you don't, that's okay too. Do you have like a spreadsheet where you fill in some metrics? Do you get an outside third party? Do you have another quality check tool other than QA? Or you don't even really review them, you just take them as they are. So it looks like you've got some slightly different answers, and again, it varies. It's always interesting to see how people cope with this, because it's not necessarily an easy thing, and a lot of the tools on the market that will help with this are quite expensive. So always interesting to see how people deal with this. And then one last quick question, because this one is always interesting. How often do you check them? If you are checking them, how often do you check them? Do you check them just at the beginning? Do you check them during the life cycle of the project, or never? You know, we probably have quite a variety there too. And some people will try and check after every update, but maybe not necessarily a thorough check. Okay, so we have a few people who took a chance and answered, and I'll share that. Okay, it's always interesting because it does vary considerably, and it will vary on the size of project, the complexity of project. So there's a lot of factors, of course, that will dictate. So that's another reason, really, that we thought QA would be a great fit for so many companies, is because you can make sure you're doing quality checks, not only at the beginning, but we have quality checks that check updates. Okay, now that's an important piece as well. And you can do it very, very quickly. Okay, so it really brings that quality metric capability to life. And it's not just a one off, and it becomes part of your regular routine. Okay, so let's touch on how it works, some of the things that we can check, and we'll touch on some of the new metrics that we created notebooks and items for. Okay, there's only so many things that you can measure, of course, and there's a lot of repetition between the different quality standards out there in the world. And some of them, of course, are activities, whether your activities are a reasonable size, whether your activities have a good amount of logic and sequencing, or predecessor successor development, whether or not you're using an inordinate amount of constraints, so it's more of a picture, or whether it's truly a schedule with a real living, breathing critical path. Then you can get into whether or not you've got resourcing on the project. And not everyone necessarily uses P6 that way, but it's certainly something you should strive towards. And also costing. Okay, again, not everyone uses it, and I think their percentage split is about 70% use dates. Well, 100% use dates, 70% use dates and resources, and maybe another 20 to 30 go the full way with costing as well. Okay, so it does vary, but you're definitely looking at monitoring all of those aspects. So some of the standards that we have, and we've just formalized some of the Government of Accountability Office standards. We formalized them in notebooks, and we formalized the Air Naval. But we hit all the main points on all the industry best practice standard metrics. And one of the things that we could do in QA is easily configure the notebooks to include the ones that you want, okay, including custom ones that go beyond the out-of-the-box industry standard best practices. That's where we touch on what we call business process standards. Okay, so we have, I'll show you the example. We have one client who wants to monitor calendars. And so we've made special notebooks for their business process metrics that they want to monitor, okay, including naming conventions and things like that that are not necessarily in the industry best practices, but they're ones that you can introduce. Now, the other thing that QA does really, really easily, very, very seamlessly is it allows you to put different standards to different types of projects. So you don't have to have one set of standards across the whole organization. You can mix and match standards based on the project types, or perhaps the project types can be short-term and long-term, as well as different stages or phases of the project. Okay, so the critical eye that you might be applying at the early onset of a project. So let's say at a first gate, so just project ideation or proposal stage can certainly vary to what you might do once it's approved and you're moving ahead and it's more formalized. Okay, so QA lets you do all that, which is really nice. Okay, looks like, okay, perfect. Yeah, it looks like maybe one of the attendees is having some struggles with the audio. So let us know if you're having any struggles. It looks like at most of the attendees can hear. So maybe just your audio settings that you need to take a look at. Okay, so before I jump in and start showing the software, let's just touch on the way this works. So what we put in is we put in the validations, and then we run the analysis, and then we can fix the problems as we work. And then you can keep running it as often as you wish. Now, we also have the ability to snapshot. So quite a few of our clients who use QA also use our data warehouse for reporting. So you can snapshot the quality metrics, and then you can do month over month, week over week, year over year types of comparisons. So you can see whether the trend is going in a good direction or going in the wrong direction. So the snapshotting process can be invaluable. And then you can do reporting on that. And reporting can go out into other systems, any of your publishing systems. So regardless of which one you use, so whether it's Power BI or Tableau or Oracle Data Visualization, BI Publisher, you can push the metrics out. Okay. If you just want to use layouts in P6 with notebooks, that works too. Okay, so there's lots of different ways you can take the data and automatically put it out into different reporting engines. Okay. Some of the ones that we've done, we've pushed them out into standard reports, into Word as well. Okay, so there's many different ways you can consume the metrics beyond just using them directly in P6. So I'll show you some of that as I walk through the software. Okay, so I will actually jump into P6. So I'm going to switch to sharing my screen. And I'm going to use P6-QA in the client app, but you can certainly run the same sort of metrics and information inside of the web. So if you use P6 Web or P6 EPPM, you can do the same things up there. Okay, so I'm going to start in the project window. So in the project window, we just take advantage, we try and take full advantage of all the regular P6 functions. So the idea here is it makes it a lighter lift for a client to deploy P6-QA into their environment because we're using most of what you do on a regular basis. So we take full advantage of filters and layouts, and you can see we're taking advantage of the user-defined fields out of the box in P6 to highlight the quality metrics that we're monitoring. Okay, so I'm going to start with a standard layout, and then we'll jump into the DCMA, and we'll jump into the GAO and Naval Air, the new notebooks. So let me explain what you're looking at. So you're looking at multiple projects, and you're looking at their last run for QA and where they stand in terms of the quality of the schedule. So we're looking at, of course, all the different kinds of logic. So we're looking at predecessors, successors, whether any logic is missing altogether. We're looking at lags and leads, so negative lags and positive lags, essentially. We're looking at whether they're long, we're looking at whether they're of the right sort of logic type. Okay, so we're critiquing logic heavily, and of course, constraints that go along with kind of superseding the logic diagram. So we're looking at those types of metrics quite closely because, of course, that's a key factor on a properly put together CPM schedule. Now, not necessarily every project has to be part of running P6-QA. So you can or you don't have to, and you control that as a user. So that's what you're seeing here. So this first project, I have it run P6-QA on it at the moment, okay? So I can certainly do that, but before I do that, I'm going to show you how you establish what makes up what sort of controls whether the flag is going to be a green or a red stop sign, or in some cases it could be a warning, okay, which would be a yield sign. So we take full advantage of the out-of-the-box flagging that's inside of P6. So to go along with the results, so these are the results, and these are the results at the project level. We're going to not only see results at the project level, but we're going to see the detailed results on the activities. But before we get into that, let's actually see how we set these up. Okay, so we set them up by establishing the criteria that controls whether it's red, yellow, or green. So these are slightly different metrics than the ones I was showing you there. So some of these actually are looking at durations. So let's touch on those. So durations in P6 are down to the hours. So what we're seeing here is what we consider a high duration is 960 hours, okay, which is a couple of weeks in the schedule. Now, that can certainly vary. So if I'm building out a turnaround schedule, which is usually done in the hours, so because it's usually a very compressed timeline, so a shutdown, turnaround, or outage, depending on the industry, you have a different terminology. We can certainly make those a smaller value, and for longer range, maybe 5, 10, 20-year type projects, you can certainly make those longer range. So you can control some of these metrics, not only whether it's good or not good, so a pass or fail, if you will, but also a range. Okay, so that would be anything that's got a duration, anything that's got a float, which is duration based. So those can be managed, not only pass or fail, but also the range, which would give the yield sign. Okay. Now, some of these will also be pass or fail with a percentage. So let's look at that. So if we're looking at whether a logic tie is missing, okay. So putting a 0 means I have no tolerance for a logic tie missing. Putting a 0.5 is 5%, so 5 out of 100 activities. If I've got a logic tie, I could still give a pass to that, okay? So that's going to be up to your team and the state of the project development as to what constitutes a red which would be a 0 tolerance, or in this case, a 5% tolerance. Okay. So you can certainly buffer that as you see fit. And if you want to have 0 tolerance, then that's fine too. You can set those up to 0, as I've done in this example. Okay. So you can mix and match. You can establish your own standards. You can set your own standards by project type. And that gives you the flexibility. Okay, so if you're an engineering company, you've got a certain client that wants 0 tolerance and others that have a bit more room, you're going to be able to achieve that in this one tool. You don't have to go outside for other tools to help you with that. Okay, so that's seeing the output and setting up the result. Setting up the criteria. Now, you can do that on the schedule quality, and let me just show you the business process metrics as well. I'll start with the criteria, and then we can flip back, and then I'm going to actually run it, and we can talk about the results. So the thing that we've got here on the business process quality metrics really allows you to create your own metrics for P6 that let you validate many other things that you can't necessarily do very simply just by hitting F9, which gives you some information on the critical path items, but it doesn't get into a deep dive on things like whether we want the schedule to be scheduled every 30 days as a minimum. Okay. So that's a business process that you've said we don't want any projects not scheduled within some length of time. So in this case, it's between 14 and 30 days. So 30 days is the outlier, and anything under 14 days would be good. Okay. So or codes. Okay. How many of you wish that you had mandatory activity codes? Well, we can keep wishing. We still don't have it. Yet QA allows you to monitor and create mandatory codes. It's a flag that you set, and then we'll monitor whether those codes are being filled in. Okay, so this works very well and gives you that extra boost that we don't have out of the box in P6. So we've got a bunch of them. Okay, so if you're using resources and you want to use a primary role, particularly if you've got primary role people updating your schedule, you want to make sure you're flagging those. Okay, or are you even using roles? That may be part of your business process, that we use roles and we want to make sure they're assigned. Okay, so again, this business process piece that we've got in our tool, and I don't think you've got another tool out there that does this, really brings the capability of using P6 well across your corporate portfolio. It brings a lot of strength to that, and you can take full advantage of the software that you might be struggling with, especially if you've got new users who aren't as familiar and you need to do some coaching. Okay, so this really helps take the pressure off the senior schedulers. It empowers the younger, more maybe less experienced schedulers that you're bringing onto the team, and helps them do a lot more self-critiquing and making sure that they haven't missed filling something in. Okay, so it really helps with the job aids that you might have, the cheat sheets. This helps bring it to a whole other level. So the last one here is steps, resources. Okay, so those are some interesting ones. It helps, again, you take full advantage of P6. Okay, so I'm going to jump to one of the new metrics. We had it already, but we formalized the notebook, and we formalized the layouts, so that we can demonstrate that we've got this standard as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to run the P6-QA. And I'm going to include this project in the P6-QA projects that can be run. Now, I can run this either on a regular basis, as you can see here. So these are running every month. These are running every week. This one is set to be run manually. So when I tell it to run, it will run. And that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to ask it to go ahead and run this. And I can run it ad hoc just by taking off the last run, saving that with a refresh to the database. And that's going to go ask P6-QA to go off and run all the metrics. Okay. Now, when it does that, so far I've just shown you the project level. When it does that, it's going to go into all the activities and it's going to go and run all of the analysis right down onto the activities. And once it's done its thing, it's going to bring back the overall result to the top level here. Okay. So it's going to give us the summary, which is what we're looking at here. And in doing that, it's also going to update the notebook. Okay. So let me go ahead and open this up so you can see the notebook in full scale. So for the standard metrics that we've got in the system, so the DCMA, the GAO, the Air Naval, we create a notebook that allows you to communicate out to the management team or to the company that sent you the schedule. It gives you the metrics in an easier to consume form, and you can share that out. They're HTML, so they can be published out. They can be copied and pasted into an email, or into Word, or however you want to do that communication. Okay. So let me explain what we're taking a look at. Okay, so we've got each one of the metrics that we're measuring. So we've got open ends, open predecessors, successors. We've got productivity, predecessor, tracking, different logic ties, different types, lags and leads. So it's very heavy focus on the second metric, for good quality CPM scheduling. So we've got the percentage of activities that are falling into that category. And we've got these statistics so that you not only do you have the percentage value, but the actual raw numeric value. Okay, so these are small schedules, 32 activities that are in play, and we've got a handful that are hitting these metrics. So that's kind of the overall starting point. And then we go into each metric in a bit more detail. And we give you a list of the activities that are hitting the fail criteria or not quite meeting the standard. Again, these can all be copied and pasted out to another system if need be, okay? Or automated. So we have automated these into Word reports as well, okay? So we give more detail, and then you can certainly use these to go into the schedule and critique and understand why we didn't quite meet the standard. Okay. Now, typically, what you do is you open the project, and then you have a matching layout that would give you the information. So I'm going to dig into a layout that's already got the standard set into the system, so I don't have to go find the fields and create that. Okay, so we're just, again, trying to take full advantage of the things that you do in P6 already that you're comfortable with doing. So we saw that we had a few problems with logic, of course. So we've got, of course, a successor that's missing. We've got an open end, of course, as a result, and logic is missing. So I can go take a look at what's going on with that. And it looks like to me that this is a milestone, and that's probably why we've got a logic tie missing, which is what we're seeing. So it's a finish milestone. Finish milestones don't usually have a successor. Okay, so you can say, okay, well, yes, it's true that I'm missing a successor, but I've evaluated this because it's a milestone and it's all right that I'm missing that. So we're using the blue star to let you override the analysis of that. So it doesn't keep coming up every single time you run it, giving you what we're going to call a false positive in this case. Okay. So that may be the case for all three of these, in which case we can flag them as being all right. And if you want to put a note in as well, you can certainly do that. Okay, so that we would just do that with some extra notes, just so you can tag why you're doing an override. Okay, now that would be the case for all these three in my scenario, because they are milestones. And of course, that's why I've grouped them like this. Now, level of efforts as well could give some false positives, right? Because the way that you build a level of effort. So that's why we've put the layout together like this. When we're looking at logic, often it's very handy to see them by the type of activity. Because it's not surprising that a start the project milestone has no predecessor. So again, this makes this very easy for me to say, okay, these are false positives, and I can clear those out, okay? So again, trying to make it very easy for you to take a look at to evaluate. Now, going along with that evaluation is the logic type. Now, quite a few of the quality metrics out in the world want you to have finish to starts as much as possible, which makes total sense because they're the easiest kind of logic to manage. However, not every activity type lends itself to a finish to start. So again, this is another thing that you can give it a particularly here, might make sense to say, well, it's all right that it's a finish to finish. It is a finish milestone after all. Okay. So this lets you clear out the false positives and rerun the analysis. And rerunning the analysis is as simple as clearing out the date last run and give it a refresh. So it sets that into the database and it will rerun the analysis. Okay. Now, depending on how much I've cleared out, some of these should start to come into a green. Okay, I'm not sure if I went quite far enough with those few examples. Yeah, there we go. We got a few that flipped to green. Okay, so it's as easy as that to help self-critique and then to make sure you've done the clear ups as appropriate. And we track that, so we don't ignore the fact that some of these were um, turned off. So here's an example, okay, letting you know that we found 8, but four of the 8 we flagged as being okay, and we're really only monitoring 4 at this moment. Okay, so that's why we've got the 2 fields to explain to you. Okay, well, if we watched every single activity, it would be 25%, but based on the self-critiquing, the starring, if you will, the exception, we're at 12.5. Okay, so that's how easy this tool is to use. There's no other tool on the market that's as simple for the immediate feedback and self-critiquing that you can do. So that was on the GAO. The Naval Air is very, very similar. Quite a few of the metrics are very much the same. So these fall highly into the logic area. And then on the updated. Okay. So we already had the DCMA validations. So if that's the one that your team prefers to use or closer to it, you can certainly use that. And if you want your own, you can get into your own specific ones, which can be set into a notebook, however you wish. Okay. So let's touch on some of the business process metrics while we're looking at this. So I just want to look at let's go ahead and open this up and just look at these a little closer. So some of the business process metrics are more on the side of resourcing. So do we have roles that we've assigned? Do we use primary resources? Are we using cost accounts, expenses, steps? So it's going a layer deeper beyond just logic. Now, some of our clients have very, very interesting logic metrics as well. So we've introduced some additional ones, okay? So things like durations. Durations can't be in portions of days. Things like logic ties and remaining durations, watching remaining durations against original durations. So again, we can monitor very, very detailed things. There hasn't been anything thrown at us yet from a client that we haven't been able to monitor with one of the out-of-the-box ones or with a special newly introduced BP one. Okay. Okay. So let's touch on once you get into updating. Okay. And let's touch on what updating metrics look at. So I'm going to use one of these schedules that have already been updated just to give you a feel for what that looks like. And I think I'll use the second progress one. And I'll open up that. And then I'll jump to an updating layout. Because not only do you want to obviously monitor prior to updating. So when you're prior to baselining, prior to accepting the schedule, sorry, I've gone too far. You want to look at the updating layouts. So here we go. This is the one I'm looking for. So once they start updating, you want to make sure that things are still in a good quality standard. So you'll reuse your logic ones because you've already got them there. Because if they've introduced new activities, maybe they've deleted activities by mistake, you want to be monitoring that logic to make sure they still hold together. You also want to be monitoring the updating. Okay, so actual dates. Do the actual dates make sense? And one of the first things that you want to look at is durations and dates. You want to see if things are going longer or coming shorter. So let's just see what's going on here. Okay, let's just reschedule this just to make sure. And then what I'll do is I'll put some updates in. And I should have double checked my data date. Let's just take a look at that. Okay, 23rd of June, 2020. Okay, so let's just do a few updates on some of these activities and you'll get the idea. Sorry, I'm clearly tired. June 23rd. Okay, so I'm going to do some updates on here. So I'm going to do some strange updates. So first and foremost, I'm going to start the activity, this one activity after the data date. That's not a very normal thing. So it's the kind of thing that you would want to monitor. Now this activity has already been started. Now let's take a look at the resources. So our resources are, I'm going to put the remaining at a very big number. So let's obviously go over budget on the remaining because I want you to see that we're going to monitor that, which is something that can happen and you want that flagged. Let's do one more. Let's look at our remaining duration. So this is another one. So this one started, which is good. And I'm just going to update the remaining duration. And again, I'm going to make it go longer. Okay. And I'm going to save that. And I'm going to reschedule. And then I'm going to rerun the QA on it. And I'm going to run it. And it should start to run through and update the metrics. Now, typically, I would probably want to use I'll go ahead and save that. I would probably want to use an updating layout actually, because that probably would have been more valuable here to see some of these come into play. So let's go ahead and run it. There we go. Okay. So now it ran it. It gives you the timestamp so you know the last time that it ran for you. That's important so that you know you're looking at up-to-date information, and it'll start to let you know how you're doing on updating. Okay. So this is a hugely important one as you start to progress. You want to see about your duration. Is the actual duration going longer than the budgeted original duration? Do I have any activities that are finishing late? Do I have any activities that are missing resource updates? So they're in progress, but there's no actual hours. That's important if you're using earned value or doing any of that kind of analysis, because maybe an update got missed. Okay, so these are really important ones. Are my actual dates, are they after my data date? Okay, because that's not normal. There might be an odd one where you might accept that, but it's not normal. So it's generally a bust on the updating process. So we're taking a look at all of these different kinds of metrics. And then here you go. You can start to see some of the ones that I did those updates on, and we can see where those busts are. Okay, so here's the one where the actual start date is after the data date. So this flags it very easily. Not an easy one to find on your own necessarily. Okay, so this just makes it so simple to run different layouts, to use your grouping and sorting, and automatically run through and find where those busts are. Okay, so that's a very important piece of what you want to do on an ongoing basis. It helps you get more updates coming to you more quickly, more often, because you've got a very slick process to identify where the problems are. Okay, and then you can go and see why those problems took place. Was it data entry error, or are we truly trending over? Okay, and then you can check your variances and get your notes in as to why you're trending over. And then, of course, have those conversations on how we're going to get back on track. Okay, so we're not only monitoring prior to execution, we're monitoring throughout the execution. And we can monitor business process metrics as well. Okay. I'll go ahead and save that. Okay, so some of the business process metrics that I mentioned were some different resourcing. So primary resources, cost accounts, so we can certainly see what's going on there. So the primary resource is unchecked. And if you're using the updating through team member, and that's one of your approaches for the updating, that's an important piece. The update won't be on anyone's, in anyone's app. Okay, so that's an important one. If we're using role-based metrics and role-based resource analysis, and you've missed roles in here, okay, you want to be able to find that, okay? So yes, I could go to resource assignment layout and I could go and find where there's a role missing, but it's much harder to have to dig through all of these different layouts to find where any of the gaps exist, okay? I don't even have a layout right now for it, okay? But you could do it that way. So we're trying to make life easier. So a new user in particular, or if you have to critique a lot of schedules, you can do it readily without without having to jump all over the place and struggle with Excel spreadsheets and metrics run in Excel and other software tools that usually only the senior person has access to, things like that. Okay, so that's what we've tried to do with this tool, and it can save you hundreds and hundreds of hours on your scheduling processes and make it much more consistent across the team. Okay, good. So I think I've touched on most of them. Probably the other one that's pretty interesting is the mandatory codes. So let me just jump into that project that has the mandatory codes and the mandatory code flags. Okay, here we go. So let me show you the activity codes that we've established as mandatory. I need to go to some that have them assigned so you can see them. Let me just scroll down. Oh boy, all of them are missing. Okay, no problem. So not a problem. Let's just go so I can show you which ones are established as mandatory in the database, and that'll give you a feel for it. That's all. Yikes, how am I going to see it soon? I probably just have way too many codes inside of here. So let me just scroll down. Here we go. Here are some of them. Okay, found some. They were just further down.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we've done is we've done a very, very simple, let's use this work type. It's a better example. We've done a very, very simple naming convention that you can control. And in our database, it's this asterisk between the brackets. Those are established as mandatory, okay? So let's use the responsibility. That's always a good one. So what this means is if you haven't tagged responsibility, you're going to get that you're missing a mandatory code. So that lets us go ahead and establish that, okay, so we need to assign this on all of these activities for us to get that flag off. Okay, so it's huge, huge benefit when you're trying to do dashboard reports and they rely on coding so that you can see whether you're going to have a problem in the reporting before it gets to the managers in their meetings, and then you've got data missing. Okay, so it helps make sure you've got that quality. And I haven't done enough coding to clear this. So there were quite a few codes and they need to be all cleared before this red goes away. Okay, that's another really beneficial one we use with lots of our clients. Okay, so I think I've given you enough of an overview. If there are any quality metrics you're particularly interested, you certainly can ask a question and I'll try and tackle it. I'm going to jump back to the PowerPoint and run through a few of the case studies that we've done, okay? But if there are questions and there are particular items you want to see, just go ahead and chat them in. And if I can't answer them, Sue can also tackle them as we go. Okay, let's share the material. Okay, broadcast, there we go. Okay, so very, very quick overview, of course, of the way the tool works, how simple it is to set up, how easy it is to create these standard layouts for your team so you can make sure that you can use the tool well and make sure you're adhering not only to general standards in the world on best practices, but also your own internal ones. So really what we found is the benefit here is, of course, the skill set of your team and the ability to raise the standards within your team as well as within your portfolio very, very quickly. Okay, so we actually have, for some of our clients, they're not P6 users doing the critiquing. It's the site engineers who work with the contractors, who receive the schedule. They do the first critique. They know whether it's close enough or not, hand it off to the schedulers if there's something they're unsure of. that makes them able to critique the schedules very quickly, very quickly. And in that particular client, which I'll do in the case study, they get schedules in weekly, sometimes every 2 weeks, and worst case, every month. Okay, so their updating process is very, very strong, and their critiquing process is very strong. Of course, the quality. Okay, so I could see I had a problem very, very fast. The critical path was not reliable. So the ability to hit that critical path and see it very quickly is very important. If you've got a very large schedule and you have to critique it, so you can do it very quickly with P6-QA. So this is also going to be a case study, critiquing an 8,000 activity schedule in less than 2 hours. Okay, you can do it with P6-QA. So let me jump into some of the case studies and dive a little deeper on that. So I helped a client, a major project in New York City, over $600 million multi-purpose tower. The developer did not have a scheduler on their team. They were relying on the contractor to provide the schedule. Now, this was the 8,000 activity project, very, very big project, lots and lots of detail. And the client was the CFO of the developing company, had no idea how to look at this. So unfortunately, they were very cheap. They didn't want to give us too many hours. So I ran the P6-QA on it. It took me a few hours to critique it and then a few hours to explain it to the client. So in less than 4 hours, I was able to explain to him where the gaps were, the things that he needed to go back and push from the contractor on the schedule. So very, very good use in that case. That's where we use it as a software as a service. We ran the software for the client in that case and did the critiquing. Okay, so that's one way you could certainly take advantage of it. And although I knew a fair bit about the project, I didn't know that much about the project. So in terms of the cost to the client was very, very low. And they went back and asked for additional improvements to the schedule. So let me do another one. So a major program. So this is for an engineering company running Department of Transportation programs. They get the schedules updated every week, 2 weeks, monthly at the most. They have numerous projects on the go. So they're critiquing hundreds of projects in any given month. These are coming from contractors primarily, and these contractors can be very small contractors with not a lot of scheduling experience to very, very large international contractors. So they've got a huge mix. They've got very strong project specifications requiring very precise updating methodologies. Okay, so they critique calendars, they critique the actual durations versus original durations. They have a lot of quality metrics, and they have the lead site engineers really doing the initial quality metricing because they liaise with the contractors on the day-to-day basis. They do have a project scheduling and project controls team as the backup, but they don't do the first pass on the update critique. So when we switch from them doing it manually to doing it with QA, they literally breathe not only a sigh of relief, but hours, lots of hours, and extra overtime was done away with because they could do the critiquing very, very consistently. They could update their overall global reporting to their client very, very easily. So it was a huge, huge benefit and win for people running project programs. So that's something to look at. And then a third example was critiquing an IT program as well. So huge, huge interlaced program with multiple deliverables. And again, they needed a way to get consistency across the team on how to critique it. So those are some really interesting deployments that we've done that give you just a flavor for the different ways that you can take advantage of P6-QA. Okay, so I wanted to open it up to questions. I haven't seen any come in through the chat or the questions area. So hopefully that means the tool is fairly obvious, fairly intuitive. It really is quite an easy tool to work with. So the legwork is really in establishing the criteria that you want to use. So we usually have a bit of consulting effort to deploying the tool and getting the notebooks set up, getting the metrics set up, running a few examples, and then we hand it off to the client to run. And then if you need to add a metric, usually it's not a big process. I'd say probably 2 to 4 hours for something that's similar to what we've already got. Something that might be a much more complicated. So we had one client that wanted global codes to be moved to global, things of that nature. So those could be a little more complicated. So they might take a half a day to a day to set up. Okay, so generally very, very easy to add a new criteria to the system as well. Okay, well, certainly if, might be a question. Sorry, I just flipped over. Okay, good. Used in project online. So I'm not sure if that means the Prime software tool. So, excuse me. So we could certainly deploy some of this to Prime. There are some capabilities that we could certainly take advantage. So if that's what some of you are using, just reach out because it's something we could certainly explore. Although the bulk of our users certainly are P6 users, if you're using the online P6 cloud, let us know because there's certainly things we could do to help you in that aspect. Oh, Microsoft project. Oh, okay, interesting. Well, yeah, let us know because we could certainly explore other types of programming there as well. Thank you. Okay, so this is just one of many tools that Emerald has in our toolkit. You know, we are a long-term partner, 27 years, and we've had programmers on the team from the very, very beginning. So the benefit of that is we've got a vast toolkit, not only for P6, but also for Unifier and AConnects. So let us know the types of things that you're interested in. Of course, for P6, not only do we have this QA tool, but we've got Loader, we've got our caps updating, taps updating, calculator functionality that lets you do all sorts of great different calculations, roll-ups, and things like that. So certainly reach out because we've got a lot of functionality to make your life easier inside of all of the Oracle construction and engineering business unit tools. So I've got here on the screen my contact info. If you want to reach out, Sue and Donna can throw their contact info into the system as well. And if there are things that you want to explore further, I'm going to put up the last question. And if there is a thing that you want to explore further, let us know. We're happy to reach out. If you just want to stay on the mailing list, that's good too. If you want us to phone you, talk about pricing, again, just let us know. And this is the easiest way to let us know is just to answer this quick poll question so that we know how to continue to support you and stay in touch appropriately. Okay, good. So we'll see if there's any questions. So it doesn't look like any questions are jumping out right now. If there are some that come up later, just send us a quick email and we'll try and answer those questions as best as we can. And again, just want to make sure that we're helping you do the best you can with the different tools you've got in your toolkit. getting the best value out of those as you can. Okay, so I'll stop the recording here and we'll